Okay, so in this session we're still on fixed property. So let me just make a header, fixed property. In this session we're in fixed property and we're still trying to just basically, lay down certain requirements and rules that we must be aware of when dealing with fixed property. So fixed property, in this instance, we basically started off with a board that will basically act as like a guideline for our interest in having to deal with property, be it fixed property, so be it also second-hand and new fixed property. So I've basically created a table of some sort, even though it's not too clear, but if you can follow with me as I'm reading out the titles. So we'll likely say second-hand and new, So for the first line of issue, I've got commercial accommodation, which is a new property, and I've got over here VAT vendor is our first title, and I've got WTV, which would stand for was there VAT. So if yes there was VAT, we'll put down VAT, yes. If there was no VAT, we'll go on to say no. And then if it's obviously a VATable transaction, we'll have to state what kind of VAT was claimed. Was it actual VAT that was claimed and I'll abbreviate it with AV, or was it notional VAT and I'll abbreviate it with NV for notional VAT. And was it transfer duty as well? I'll abbreviate it with TD. So please get those basic initials, just record it in your reasoning as we're trying to work this table out. So the new line that we'll likely be dealing with, we'll be dealing with commercial accommodation. Then I've also got a line here which also says not a VAT vendor. Then the second part is one for second-hand property, and I've also got a line here stating not a VAT vendor. As the category stated, we've got category 1, VAT vendor. Was the VAT levied, yes or no? Was it, what kind of VAT was there? If it was a yes answer, actual VAT or notional VAT, or notional and transfer duty, So be aware of that. So let's start with this table in working it out, just to give you some sort of basis on which to work out as to how you can tackle a question that can be posed for you to work out and to basically figure out what kind of fixed property you're dealing with. So let's start then. Okay, so we've got new property, which is commercial accommodation, and we've got a VAT vendor, so we're going to give that a tick. Okay, if you've got commercial accommodation and you've got a VAT vendor as the actual seller, was there VAT which was levied? What is the answer? And the answer would be yes, there was actual VAT, because it's commercial accommodation, which is a taxable supply, and it's been supplied by somebody who's actually a recognized VAT vendor. So what kind of VAT would you be claiming? We'll be claiming actual VAT, because that's what we'll be claiming. So would there be notional VAT, notional input VAT? No, there would not be notional input VAT. There would not be transfer duty, because we've got actual VAT. Where there's actual VAT, there's no need for you to account for actual transfer duty. So the buyer on the one side would have obviously recognized like input VAT, so there'd be a net effect. So just be aware that we're looking at from the perspective of the buyer, because the status of the buyer determines our position. The status of the seller determines our position as the buyer as to what kind of likely VAT we will be levying, or if there would also likely be transfer duty. But let's not waste too much time on that and move on. So we've got a second line now. So now take an instance where we don't have a recognized VAT vendor as in here, but for the same commercial accommodation, but it's not a recognized commercial vendor. In this instance, we've got not a VAT vendor. Would they be VAT levied by non-vendor? There'd be no. He's not a non-vendor, so there'd not be any VAT levied. So no, there's no VAT which is going to be levied, because he's not a VAT vendor. He's not a VAT vendor. We've marked that. VAT vendor, not a VAT vendor. What kind of VAT? There's no VAT because he's not a VAT vendor. So there's no VAT. There's no VAT. There's no notional VAT. So what would likely be there? So what would likely be there is transfer duty, because there's no VAT. And I'll come back to this point as we finished with everything else. So we get that. What kind of VAT is there? Is there a VAT vendor? No, there's no VAT vendor. It's not a VAT vendor. So we've marked that, tick that. Would they be VAT? No, they would not be VAT. So we tick that. No actual VAT could be recognized. No notional input VAT could be recognized because it's not a second hand as defined. And of course, transfer duties would be the only option that we have to basically recognize, because there was no actual VAT. And this is fixed property, which is new property. Therefore, there must be transfer duties paid over by the buyer. So now we're moving over to second hand property, right? And we're dealing with a VAT vendor. In this instance, was there VAT? If you're dealing with a second-hand property, but the actual person selling the second-hand is a VAT vendor, would there be VAT? Yes, there would have been VAT. Okay, what kind of VAT would there have been? It would have been actual VAT, because it is an actual VAT vendor, so it would have been actual VAT. So that here AV for actual VAT, right? Even though it's second-hand property, so there will obviously not be notional input, because why? Because we've got actual VAT, so there would not be transfer duties as well, right? Good. So now we're moving over to, he's not a VAT vendor. Would they be VAT? No, they would not be VAT, because he's not a non-vendor, So what kind of VAT would they be? They would not be VAT, because the guy is not registered as a VAT vendor. That would be the seller's position. So there would not be actual VAT. It would not be there. Then what kind of VAT can we claim as the sellers, as the buyers on the receiving end? We can now claim notional VAT, notional input VAT, right? And notional input VAT then arises. However, because we're also claiming notional input VAT, this will be married to transfer duty as well. Because why? Because there was actually no VAT. Remember, there was no VAT. That's why this transfer duty has to come about, because this is a form of a VAT for SARS. It's a form of a VAT for SARS, so that the two can be married, because you've claimed notional input VAT, so now they at least want to get at least transfer duty, so that this is at least a buffer effect for them to basically say, okay, we can basically say that we can set the two against each other, because this guy has claimed notional input VAT, so therefore we must also claim transfer duty, which acts as almost like a VAT of some kind, which is a point that we kind of spoke about in one of the two clips that we made about the intro, and just as to what you should be looking out for, right? I hope that's clear. I hope that is clear, So this is almost like a net-off effect, net-off effect. So just look out for that. Like the only time when there will be notional VAT and transfer duty is if the seller is actually a non-vendor. And of course, the one time that we realize that there will be transfer duties, which is a point I said we come back to, is the situation where now you've been sold normal commercial property, which is a taxable supply in this instance, but the actual VAT vendor is not a registered VAT vendor. So in that instance, because it's not a second-hand good, you can't claim either actual VAT, notional VAT, right? You can't claim notional VAT, and you can't claim notional actual VAT as well, because you're dealing with a non-vendor. However, because it's a sale of fixed property, you need to pay over transfer duties, you as the buyer. And I'm coming back to this and saying this part basically, when I kind of like thought about it carefully, this is the worst case scenario for a buyer. Worst case scenario. Worst case scenario for a buyer. Why am I saying this? This is the worst case scenario because the buyer in this instance is actually paying transfer duty.